In this lesson, we'll cover the MB's innovative profile system, including its purpose and how to create and manage profiles. Profiles are used to easily set and recall a group of settings tailored for a specific viewing and usage scenario. For example, profiles make it simple to enable and customize the look of various MB features, such as motion AI, nonlinear stretch, and subtitle management. You can also use profiles for any scenario you wish to cover, such as special settings for watching an action movie versus a classic movie, or for watching with ambient light in your room. Profiles can also be activated automatically, even without a control system, such as applying certain settings when a particular source device is used or based on an incoming signal information. For instance, you might apply certain settings when using your Apple TV, or different sharpening settings when using 1080p signal. Likewise, dealers who travel with an MB can utilize profiles to easily switch between various displays and screen aspect ratios, saving time from having to reconfigure the MB for each setup. Unlike most other products that use traditional presets or memory banks, which become cumbersome as the number of combinations increase, MB's profile system provides a streamlined approach. You can create an unlimited combination of settings without the complexity or redundancy of updating multiple memory banks. This flexibility makes the MB not only simple to use, but also provides seamless integration and power flexibility that our dealers and end users value. For this lesson, I'll walk you through the complete profile user guide available from madVRMB.com. Now, this guide contains a lot of advanced information, so I encourage you to download and study it afterwards, as it might be a bit overwhelming to try and digest everything through this lesson alone. If you're looking for a more basic introduction, see the Introduction to Profiles guide, also available on the website. Let's go ahead and get started. So we've already talked about what profiles are in principle. Let's talk about why not just use presets. So many products use presets or memory banks for settings management, and you're likely familiar with this approach. You configure all the settings in the system how you want, you save the settings to a memory bank, and then later you recall all the settings that way. While it's easy to implement, it also has several drawbacks. At the core of the profile system is the profile itself. Profiles provide a way to recall a group of settings automatically or manually for a particular purpose. So in this section, we'll take a closer look at the MB menu system, what profiles are and how they work, along with the different types of profiles available, and we'll introduce you to profile groups. We've already covered menu pages through these previous lessons. So to really understand how profiles work, we need to consider how MB menu system and all its settings are organized. The MB menus consist of these several different individual menu pages, as we've gone through in these lessons, that are grouped by functions with its own settings. Now, profiles are nothing really more at the root than a custom collection of MB menu pages with customized settings. Let's look at this closer. Profiles provide an efficient way to group individual menu settings together, even settings from different menu pages, to override the default settings. You can think of each activated profile as a layer. So if setting A is overridden in profile 1, and setting B is overridden in profile 2, and both these profiles are activated, then the settings in effect will simply be all the system defaults, but with settings A and B overriding those defaults, with any temporary settings that are applied getting the highest priority. Now, predefined profiles and custom profiles, let's talk about those. MB provides several different predefined profiles, including ones activated automatically based on the properties of the incoming video signal, such as resolution, aspect ratio, or colorimetry. For example, if you use a predefined profile based on an incoming resolution of 1080p or lower, then that profile will be automatically activated when an incoming signal matches those conditions. By default, MB also provides predefined profiles for source devices, displays, nonlinear stretch, and motion AI. Source devices and displays are just empty profiles that have no effect until you save settings to them, whereas nonlinear stretch and motion AI have options to help you easily configure these options right up from the start. For instance, in nonlinear stretch, you can activate Smart Fit for scope screens, or Smart Fit for 16:9 screens, and the Envy will set all your aspect ratios as recommended for the use of nonlinear stretch. Of course, you can then always customize these settings from there if desired. The use of profiles is completely optional. If you do not have any special settings you want to use for specific source devices or displays, there's no need to set up profiles for these. You can create custom profiles for any purpose you like. For example, you can create a custom profile called Sci-Fi and set all your favorite settings for sci-fi movies there. Then when you watch a sci-fi movie, you simply activate your sci-fi profile. Let's take a look at the Envy profile menu. We covered in previous lessons how to access this menu. Custom profiles, source device profiles, and display profiles are created, renamed, deleted, and activated by using the profile menu. To access the profile menu, press the profile button on the Envy remote. You can also activate and manage profiles and profile groups automatically using a control system like Crestron, Control4, Savant, and RTI, or even using a custom program you create and run on the same network by using the Envy IP Control API. You can find more information about that at madVREnvy.com. Note that the Envy does not provide hunt and peck keyboard entry with the remote control. Therefore, to customize the names of profiles or profile groups, please attach a keyboard to one of the USB ports on the rear of the Envy. Let's talk about profile groups. To help you organize your profiles, Envy provides profile groups. The intended use is to have one or more profile groups for each general purpose, with one or more profiles assigned in that group. For example, you could create a custom profile called Daytime, Nighttime, and Batcave, where you preferred settings for each, and place these profiles into a custom profile group you create named Viewing Conditions, like you see here below. Only one profile at a time can be activated within a profile group. So, for example, we talked about Motion AI in previous lessons and having a profile that controls the various strengths. So this is a good example for a profile group because you would never want to have two or more different looks or strengths at the same time. It's just not possible. So the idea behind a profile group is you could create a Motion AI strength group and then put all the different strengths in there, and then each one of those can be activated individually. Profile groups are completely arbitrary. You can create as many of these as you want and as many profiles inside them as you want. Now that we covered the foundation for the profile system, it's time to take a look at these profiles in action. We explain the base settings, the profile bar, menu tags, temporary settings, and how everything comes together to form the active settings. Let's start with the base settings. At the root of the Envy settings management is the base settings layer, where all default values are set and inherited from. You'll recall in previous lessons we spoke a lot about saving your settings to the base layer. This is what we're referring to. The base settings are used globally unless overridden by settings in an activated profile or by temporary settings. Below is an example of the base settings defined for upscaling and sharpening. These settings are therefore the defaults on this Envy, regardless of the resolution, source device, or any other condition, unless overridden. Now, the highlighted area in the menu page shown right here, this is considered the profile bar. Since the base settings option is selected in the profile bar, the menu values shown here and that are changed here apply directly to the base settings. Let's take a closer look at that profile bar. The profile bar is used to select whether the currently displayed menu settings are for the base settings or the active settings or a specific profile. Therefore, the profile bar will always contain a selection for at least the base settings and active settings. It'll also have one for each profile, if any, that's been added to that menu page. We're going to cover that in just a moment. In the image that we just looked at, we know that the menu settings shown there are for the base settings since base settings is displayed in the profile bar. Any changes made to these menu options while base settings is selected in the profile bar will therefore be applied to the base settings and therefore become the new system defaults. Note that Envy has both settings menu and configuration menu pages. There's no difference between active settings and active configurations or between base settings and base configuration. That you'll see in the profile bar. These are simply different labels for the same thing depending on the type of menu page you're viewing. The active settings reflect the current settings in use by the Envy. Let's look at the upscaling and sharpening settings, except this time with the active settings option selected in the profile bar, right here. Comparing this to the same menu page that we just looked at above, there are two key differences. First, active settings is selected in the profile bar instead of base settings. Therefore, the menu settings shown here are for the settings that are currently active after any activated profiles and any temporary settings have been applied. Second, notice the base tag next to each menu settings. You see these right here. In general, menu tags indicate where the settings get its value from. In this case, base indicates that the setting is coming from the base settings and is not currently being overridden by any profile or any temporary settings. If the base setting is set to auto instead of set to an overridden value, auto will appear instead of the base tag. Base tags appear only when viewing active settings. Other menu tags are temp, prof, set, and through. We'll discuss these tags as we move along. Envy makes it easy to temporarily change your settings without fear of losing your preferred or trusted settings or fouling something up. Temporary settings are especially useful for changing a setting just for the current movie or for experimenting with different options. To make changes that are temporary, you simply change them in the active settings. So make sure active settings is set in the profile bar. Since the active settings are the topmost layer in our profile hierarchy, any settings you change here are applied instantly and become in effect. Continuing with our example from above, assume you want to experiment with the image and upscaling settings, and you change it in the active setting from sharp to anti-alias, like this. Notice how the tag for the image upscaling has now changed from base to temp. This is because we made the change while active settings was selected in the profile bar. The temp tag here indicates that the setting is being overridden temporarily instead of being inherited from the base settings above. Temp tags appear only in the active settings, since that is the only place where temporary changes can be made. Temporary settings are automatically reverted once there's an HDMI signal change, such as when a movie ends and the player goes back to its main menu. Likewise, temporary settings also revert if you change HDMI inputs or turn off and restart your Envy. Now, let's talk about making temporary settings permanent. As you noticed in our lessons, we talked often about making sure you saved your settings to base. That's because to keep any temporary settings, you have to save them to the base settings or to a profile, or they will revert as we just spoke about. If you want to save your temporary settings to become the new system defaults, you can save them directly to the base settings. You press the green button on the Envy remote while any temporary menu setting is highlighted. You can see here in the context-sensitive help that the Envy will show you that the green will save the setting to the base. Another way to update the base settings without making the change in active settings is to select base settings in the profile bar and then make the settings directly into the menu. You'll usually make changes directly in the active settings and then use the Save the Base option, but either approach will work. Temporary settings can also be saved to a profile, but they're used only when the profile is activated and not as default settings, as we did above. For example, assume you experiment with anti-aliasing option and you find it to be your preferred option over sharp, but only for resolutions of 1080p and below. Wouldn't it be great if the Envy automatically used your preferred anti-alias setting whenever the resolution was 1080p or below? Let's show how you would do that. First, press the yellow button when the image upscaling menu item is highlighted, since it contains the temporary setting we wish to save. This will prompt you to select the profile you want to save all the temporary settings in that menu page to, as shown below. In this case, we're going to select 1080p or lower. Now, whenever the content is 1080p or lower, the MV will automatically activate this profile and apply this anti-aliasing setting. Otherwise, the sharp setting, since that's inherited from the base, will be applied. Now that we've assigned a setting to our first profile, let's take a closer look at how menu tags are used. Having already learned about the base and temp tags, let's turn our attention to the prof, set, and through tags. The prof tag indicates when a profile is setting the value that's shown in the menu page. Profile tags appear only within active settings. Continue with our last example. After saving the profile, you'll see that the temp tag will change to either base or prof, and that will depend on the current resolution because the profile was only activated for 1080p in this particular case. Note that the profile tag indicates when a profile is setting the value shown in the menu page. Profile tags appear only within active settings, as we just discussed. If your MV is currently receiving a 1080p or lower signal in this case, the profile would automatically activate and the menu page will look like it's shown on the next page. Note that the anti-alias setting and the prof tag shown here, which indicate a profile, in this case our 1080p or lower profile, is setting that value. So what that's saying is, if you look here, you'll see that the profile is controlling this being set as anti-alias. If instead your MV was receiving a 4K signal, then you will see the image upscaling setting of sharp and the tag would show base, since the profile would not be active. In summary, menu settings tagged with prof indicate that the values shown for those settings are being set by an activated profile. This is very important to understand. Since there are many possible profiles, however, it does not indicate which profile is the one setting that value. For that, we need to look to the set tag. As we learned above, prof tag indicates when a menu item is being set by a profile. Naturally, this raises the question of which profile is the one that's setting the value. To determine this, we just need to scroll through the profiles associated with the menu page. Simply move to the profile bar and scroll through the selections. So for example, as we move through here, you can actually push left and right arrows to scroll the different profiles that are associated with this menu page. Here, because this is set and showing set, it tells you that the incoming resolution of anti-alias is being set by this profile. Also note the through tags. Recall from earlier in this document that any settings in a profile which that profile does not override are fully transparent. The through tag indicates the menu settings which are not set by the profile and are just being passed through from the base. If the base setting is set to auto, then auto will appear with the through tag. You can think of it as any setting tagged with auto through or through as if it did not exist in the menu page for that profile. Set and through tags only appear in profiles. Further note that values shown for any settings marked as true will reflect the values from the active settings. For example, if the add grain setting is temporarily changed in the active setting to 1, the add grain value shown in the profile view will be 1 instead of off, since the setting is not used by this profile. When the temporary change reverts, the value will then show as off. We should also talk about profile priority. Given what we know about the highly transparent nature of profiles and that any menu items not set by the profile simply pass through, this raises the question of how conflicts are treated. For example, what happens if a menu page exists in 2 different active profiles and the same menu item is set differently in each? In the case of conflicting settings, profiles are applied in the following order of priority from highest to lowest. Any custom profile you create takes the highest priority, followed by source device profiles, then display profiles, And lastly, lowest priority is profiles based on properties of an incoming video signal. Note that temporary changes made to the active settings have the highest priority, even overriding custom profile settings. Now, in the previous section, we assigned settings to the profile using temporary settings and the Save the Profile shortcut. This is handy for making quick adjustments based on temporary settings. When doing more extensive setup, however, you might find it more convenient to first manually add menu pages to the profile and then configure their settings without using temporary settings at all. In this section, we walk through a few more examples of creating and managing profiles, except this time we set up the profiles manually. Note, if you're an installer or an integrator that frequently configures MVs, you can set up one MV as desired with all your custom profiles, then download the configuration using the MV IP control tool. Then, for all future MVs, you can simply upload your configuration to each MV rather than setting them up from scratch. Before we go further, we need to delete the previous incoming resolution 1080p lower profile that was created. This is also a good opportunity to demonstrate how to delete profiles. To do this, go to the Upscaling Sharpening menu page. Within the profile bar, scroll until you reach the incoming resolution 1080p or lower selection. Then simply press the red button while this is highlighted, and then select Yes to confirm when prompted to delete it. We now demonstrate how to add a default menu page to a profile. In this example, we'll create two profiles for controlling upscaling and sharpening settings, one for 4K resolution and the other for 1080p and lower resolution. First, let's assign settings for use with 4K resolution. From within the Upscaling and Sharpening menu, move to the Profile bar. Then press the green button to add profile. You'll then see the following options. Select Incoming Resolution 4K or lower. The default settings for the Upscaling Sharpening menu page are then added to this profile. We'll then override these settings next. Notice in the image below how once we add the menu page to the profile, that profile is automatically selected in the profile bar. With this as a selected profile, we know we are making changes in the menu page for this profile only. Now, let's configure the settings to apply for 4K upscaling and sharpening. We change these here, and now you can see they're set to set for this particular resolution and this profile. In this case, you can see those three values that we set. Notice the indicator shows set instead of through. We already covered why this happens above. Whether that ultimately becomes a value used in the active settings depends on the profiles activated. In this case, a 4K signal needs to be present and not conflicted with any higher priority or active profiles. Note that the values that we did not override continue to show as through. Next, recall we also want to have different upscaling sharpening settings for 1080p signals. So we need to also create a new profile for 1080p and lower for the same menu page. Highlight the profile bar, press the green button to add a new profile for 1080p or lower. The menu page now looks like this. Notice that our new values from above, 314, show with the through tag. This indicates that the currently selected profile, shown here, is not setting these values, and these values will be unaffected by this profile if not set here. Now let's go ahead and configure the settings we want to assign for our 1080p and lower profile. Make sure incoming resolution 1080p or lower is selected in the profile bar. Override these settings, for example, to 4, off, and 5, just to have something different. As before, the indicators change to set to show that the selected profile is setting these values and that the settings with the through tags remain unaffected. This menu page should now look like this. Now, let's assume the MV is currently receiving a 4K signal. Therefore, when we select active settings in the profile bar, we see the following. Notice how the menu page now shows the values of 3, 1, and 4 along with the prof tag. This indicates that these values are being used because of an applied profile. Lastly, let's send a 1080p signal to the ENVI. The menu page now shows like this. Notice how the ENVI has automatically recalled our upscaling and sharpening settings for 1080p, and that it shows this as our active settings. Prof tags here indicate that the settings are coming from an active profile. In this case, the profile we added for 1080p and lower. Okay, so in this lesson, we discussed the power, the flexibility, and the ease of use of the ENVI's profile system. It is a little bit confusing at first, so it's going to take a little bit of time to set in. We recommend that you go through these documents and learn about them in more detail and play around with it. In the next lesson, we'll go ahead and we'll walk through an example of how to set up the different Motion AI looks for the various strengths available and use some practical examples that you can also apply on your own ENVI.